Marcus Rivera pushed his worn mop bucket down the marble hallway of the Blackstone Financial Tower, the squeaky wheel echoing through the empty corridors. At 3 in the morning, the 50-story building belonged to him and the security guards. The janitor's uniform hung loose on his thin frame, patches visible where he had sewn tears back together. His hands, rough from years of cleaning chemicals and hard work, gripped the mop handle as he made his way to the executive floors. The elevator ride to the 48th floor always made Marcus nervous. This was where the real money lived, where decisions worth millions happened every day. He had been cleaning these offices for 6 years, invisible to the people who worked here during daylight hours. They never looked at him, never acknowledged his presence beyond a brief nod if they happened to stay late. He preferred it that way. Invisibility meant job security. The executive suite smelled of expensive leather and polished wood. Marcus had memorized every corner, every piece of furniture, every painting on the walls. He knew which executives preferred their trash cans emptied first, which ones left coffee rings on their desks, and which ones worked so late that he sometimes had to clean around them. Tonight felt different, though. The air seemed heavier, charged with an energy he could not identify. As Marcus rounded the corner toward the corner office, he heard something unusual, a low groan, followed by what sounded like papers scattering across the floor. He paused, listening carefully. The building security was tight, and no one should be here at this hour except authorized personnel. Another sound reached his ears, weaker this time, almost like someone calling for help. Marcus approached the corner office cautiously. The nameplate on the door read, Victoria Blackstone, Chief Executive Officer. He had cleaned this office hundreds of times, but had never met its occupant. The door stood slightly ajar, light spilling into the hallway. Through the gap, Marcus could see a figure slumped over the massive mahogany desk. His first instinct was to call security, but something about the scene stopped him. The figure was not moving normally. There was no indication of a break-in or struggle. This looked like a medical emergency. Marcus had seen his father collapse from a heart attack when he was 16. The memory of that helpless feeling rushed back to him as he pushed the door open wider. Victoria Blackstone lay across her desk, her usually perfect blonde hair disheveled, her face pale and drawn. She was conscious, but barely, her breathing shallow and labored. Her eyes, a striking blue that Marcus had only seen in photographs, struggled to focus on him. She tried to speak, but could only manage a weak whisper. "Help," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. Marcus dropped his mop and rushed to her side. His basic first aid training from his previous job as a warehouse worker kicked in. He checked her pulse, which was weak and irregular. Her skin felt clammy and cold. These were signs of shock, possibly from a heart attack or severe allergic reaction. He needed to call emergency services immediately. As he reached for the phone on her desk, Victoria's hand grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes were clearer now, focused on his face with desperate intensity. "No hospitals," she whispered urgently. They will know. Stock will crash. Company will fall apart." Marcus understood immediately. Victoria Blackstone was not just any person. She was the CEO of one of the largest financial companies in the country. News of her medical emergency would send shockwaves through the markets. Thousands of employees, millions of investors, entire pension funds depended on the stability of Blackstone Financial. A heart attack or serious illness could trigger a massive sell-off, destroying countless lives in the process. But she was dying. Marcus could see it in her eyes, in the way her breathing became more labored with each passing moment. Whatever was wrong with her, she needed immediate medical attention. The conflict between saving her life and protecting her company created an impossible choice. "What happened?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Allergy," Victoria gasped. "Severe. Nuts. Someone put almonds in my dinner. EpiPen in my purse. Cannot reach it." Marcus quickly located her designer handbag and found the EpiPen inside. He had never used one before, but the instructions were clear. He removed the safety cap and pressed the device firmly against her thigh, holding it for 10 seconds as directed. The medication would buy them time, but she still needed proper medical care. "Better?" he asked after a few moments. Victoria nodded slightly, her breathing becoming less labored. The color was slowly returning to her face, but She was still in serious condition. The EpiPen was a temporary measure. Without proper treatment, the allergic reaction could return even stronger than before. I need a hospital, she admitted reluctantly. But if anyone finds out, Marcus thought quickly. His sister Maria worked as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital downtown. She often talked about their discreet VIP entrance, used by celebrities and politicians who needed medical care without media attention. The hospital had protocols for high-profile patients that included confidentiality agreements for all staff involved. I know someone, Marcus said. My sister works at St. Mary's. They have a private entrance for people like you. No media, no public records that anyone can access easily. Victoria studied his face, trying to determine if she could trust this janitor with her life and her company's future. She had built her empire by reading people, by knowing who was trustworthy and who was not. Something in Marcus's eyes, a sincerity and determination she rarely encountered in her world of corporate politics, convinced her. Okay, she whispered. But you have to come with me. If something goes wrong, if word gets out, I need someone there who understands what is at stake. Marcus nodded without hesitation. He helped Victoria to her feet, supporting her weight as they made their way to the elevator. She leaned heavily on him, her designer heels clicking unevenly on the marble floor. In the elevator, she gave him the emergency contact information for her personal physician, Dr. Sarah Chun, who could meet them at the hospital. The parking garage was empty except for a few cars belonging to the night shift security team. Victoria's black Bentley sat in its reserved space near the elevator. She handed Marcus the keys with shaking hands. You drive, she said. I'm not sure I can concentrate. The drive to St. Mary's Hospital took 20 minutes through the empty city streets. Marcus had never driven a car worth more than most people's houses, but he focused on getting Victoria there safely. She spent the trip on her phone, speaking in low tones to her doctor and someone she called her crisis management team. Even in a medical emergency, she was thinking about damage control. St. Mary's Hospital looked different at 4 in the morning. The main entrance was quiet, with only a few people in the waiting area. Marcus drove around to the side entrance Victoria's doctor had specified. Dr. Chun was waiting for them with a wheelchair and 2 nurses. They moved Victoria inside quickly and efficiently, avoiding any areas where they might encounter other patients or visitors. As the medical team worked on Victoria in the private treatment room, Marcus found himself sitting in an empty waiting area, still wearing his janitor's uniform. The contrast between his world and hers had never been more obvious. He was a minimum wage worker who cleaned toilets and emptied trash cans. She was a billionaire who controlled financial markets and employed thousands of people. Yet here they were, brought together by circumstance and his decision to help rather than simply call for assistance. Dr. Chun emerged from the treatment room after an hour. She was a small woman with kind eyes and the confident bearing of someone who dealt with medical emergencies regularly. She is stable, Dr. Chun told Marcus. The allergic reaction was severe, but you got the EpiPen to her quickly enough to prevent the worst outcomes. She will need to stay here for observation, probably until this evening. Will she be okay? Marcus asked. Physically, yes. This type of reaction can be managed effectively if treated promptly. You probably saved her life by acting so quickly. Dr. Chun paused, studying Marcus's face. She wants to see you. Marcus followed the doctor back to Victoria's room. She looked much better now, with color in her face and steady breathing. The hospital bed and medical equipment seemed out of place around someone who usually commanded boardrooms and corner offices. Thank you, Victoria said simply. I owe you my life. You do not owe me anything, Marcus replied. Anyone would have done the same thing. Victoria smiled for the first time since he had found her. No, they would not have. Most people would have called 911 and let the media circus begin. You thought about the consequences, about what my illness would mean for other people. That kind of thinking is rare. She reached for her purse and pulled out her checkbook. I want to give you something, a reward for saving my life. Marcus held up his hand. I do not want your money. I just hope you feel better. Victoria stared at him in amazement. In her world, everything had a price. Every favor came with expectations. Every act of kindness was calculated to gain advantage. She could not remember the last time someone had helped her without expecting anything in return. What do you want then? She asked. There must be something. A better job? A recommendation? Help with bills or family problems? Marcus considered the question seriously. His life was full of challenges. His mother needed expensive medication for her diabetes. His younger brother was trying to get through college while working 2 jobs. The apartment building where they lived was falling apart, and the landlord refused to make necessary repairs. There were 1,000 ways Victoria Blackstone's wealth and influence could improve his family's situation. But accepting her help would change things between them. He had helped her as one human being helping another. Taking her money would make it a transaction, a business deal. It would put them back in their proper social positions, the billionaire CEO and the grateful janitor. I want you to be more careful about what you eat, Marcus said finally. And maybe keep more than one EpiPen. Tonight could have ended very differently. Victoria laughed, a genuine sound that Marcus suspected she did not make very often. You are giving me medical advice now. I am giving you common sense advice. Money cannot help you if you die from something preventable. Dr. Chun returned to check on Victoria's condition and adjust her medication. As she worked, Victoria asked Marcus about his family, his work, his life outside the Blackstone financial tower. He found himself telling her about his mother's diabetes, his brother's college aspirations, and his own dreams of someday opening a small business. She listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was really paying attention. When Dr. Chen finished her examination, she confirmed that Victoria could be discharged that evening if her condition remained stable. The crisis management team had already put out a statement saying the CEO was working from home due to a minor illness, nothing that would alarm investors or employees. I should get back to work, Marcus said, looking at his watch. My shift ends at 6, and I still have floors to clean. Marcus, Victoria called as he reached the door. This is not over. What you did tonight, it changes things. I do not know how yet, but it changes things. Marcus nodded and left the hospital as the sun began to rise over the city. He took a taxi back to the Blackstone Financial Tower, arriving just in time to finish his shift. The executive suite looked exactly as he had left it, except for Victoria's office, which still showed signs of the previous night's emergency. As Marcus gathered his cleaning supplies and prepared to go home, he thought about Victoria's words. What did she mean when she said things would change? He had saved her life, but that was what any decent person would do. He did not expect anything to come from it. Tomorrow night, he would return to work, and she would return to running her billion-dollar company. They lived in different worlds, worlds that rarely intersected except for brief moments like the one they had shared. 3 weeks passed before Marcus saw Victoria Blackstone again. He had returned to his normal routine of cleaning the executive floors, but her corner office remained empty. According to the other janitors, she was working from her private residence while recovering from her illness. The official story held, and the financial markets continued their steady performance without any hint of the drama that had unfolded in the early morning hours. Marcus tried not to think about that night, but found it difficult to forget. Every time he cleaned her office, he remembered finding her collapsed over her desk, remembered the desperation in her eyes, remembered the weight of her body as he helped her to the elevator. He had saved someone's life, something that should have felt heroic, but mostly he felt confused about what it all meant. His life continued as before. His mother's medication costs kept climbing, forcing him to work extra shifts whenever possible. His brother Carlos had called to say he might have to drop out of college because he could not afford the tuition for next semester. The landlord had finally agreed to fix the heating in their apartment, but only after threatening legal action that Marcus could not actually afford to pursue. On a Thursday night in late October, Marcus was cleaning the 20th floor when building security called his radio. They told him to report to the main security desk in the lobby. This was unusual. Security typically left the night cleaning crew alone unless there was an emergency or a specific problem with building access. The head of security, a serious man named Rodriguez who had always treated Marcus with professional respect, handed him an envelope. This came for you today, Rodriguez said. Special delivery. The messenger said it was important. The envelope was made of heavy, expensive paper with Marcus's full name written in elegant handwriting. Inside, he found a note on Victoria Blackstone's personal stationery. Marcus, the note read, I hope you and your family are well. I have been thinking about our conversation at the hospital, particularly what you told me about your brother's education and your mother's medical expenses. I would like to discuss some opportunities that might be mutually beneficial. Please meet me tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. in my office. I will ensure that you can access the executive floor during your regular shift hours. This is not a command or requirement related to your employment. It is a personal request from someone who owes you a significant debt. Sincerely, Victoria. Marcus read the note 3 times, trying to understand what she meant by opportunities that might be mutually beneficial. Victoria Blackstone did not do anything without a purpose. She had not built a billion-dollar empire by making casual gestures or emotional decisions. If she wanted to meet with him, she had a specific reason. The next evening, Marcus arrived at work with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. He had never had a formal meeting with anyone above the level of building maintenance supervisor. The idea of sitting down with one of the most powerful business leaders in the country seemed surreal. At 7 o'clock, Marcus took the elevator to the 48th floor. Victoria's office light was on, and, through the glass walls, he could see her sitting at her desk, reviewing documents. She looked completely recovered from her medical emergency, dressed in a tailored business suit with her hair pulled back in a professional style. This was the CEO the world knew, confident and commanding. Marcus knocked on the door frame, and Victoria looked up with a smile. "Come in, please. Thank you for coming." She gestured to the chairs in front of her desk. "How have you been?" "I am fine, thank you." "How are you feeling?" "Much better. Dr. Chun says the reaction has completely resolved, and I have been much more careful about my diet." Victoria closed the folder she had been reading and gave Marcus her full attention. "I have been doing some research since our last conversation." This statement made Marcus nervous. What kind of research could a billionaire CEO conduct on a janitor? "I hope you do not mind," Victoria continued. "But I had my human resources department pull your employment file. You have an excellent record. 6 years without any complaints. Always reliable, commended twice by building management for going beyond your basic duties. Before working here, you spent 3 years in a warehouse, where you were promoted to shift supervisor before the company relocated to Mexico." Marcus nodded, wondering where this conversation was heading. "You also have some college education. 2 years of business courses at the community college, with very good grades. You stopped attending when your father became ill." Victoria paused, her expression softening. "I also learned about your family situation. Your mother's diabetes, your brother's college expenses. These are significant financial challenges on a janitor's salary." Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks. Having his private life examined by Victoria's staff felt invasive, even though he understood that someone in her position would want to know about people she planned to help. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. "Because I want to offer you an opportunity," Victoria replied. "Not charity, not a handout, but a chance to earn a position that would solve many of your family's financial problems while helping me address a business challenge I am facing." She opened a different folder and removed several documents. "Blackstone Financial is expanding into community development investments. We are creating a new division that will focus on small business loans, affordable housing projects, and economic development in underserved neighborhoods. The work requires someone who understands both the financial aspects of these investments and the real-world challenges faced by working-class families." Victoria leaned forward slightly, her blue eyes focused intently on Marcus's face. "Most of my executives grew up wealthy or became wealthy early in their careers. They understand markets and profit margins, but they do not understand what it means to choose between paying for medication and paying rent. They do not know what it feels like to work 2 jobs and still worry about making ends meet." Marcus began to see where this was going, but the implications seemed too large to believe. "I need someone who can evaluate these community investments from the perspective of the people they are supposed to help. Someone who can identify genuine opportunities and avoid projects that look good on paper but will not actually improve people's lives." Victoria slid one of the documents across the desk. "I want to offer you a position as a community investment analyst." Marcus stared at the job description. The salary listed was more than 3 times what he made as a janitor. The benefits package included full health insurance that would cover his mother's medications. There were educational benefits that would allow him to finish his business degree and help pay for Carlos's college tuition. "I do not have the qualifications for this." Marcus said finally. I have not finished college. I have no experience in finance or investment analysis. You have something more valuable than credentials, Victoria replied. You have judgment and integrity. You understand the communities we want to invest in because you live in them. The financial skills can be taught. Character and perspective cannot. Marcus read through the job description more carefully. The position involved evaluating potential investments in small businesses, reviewing affordable housing projects for feasibility, and working with community leaders to identify development priorities. It was exactly the kind of work he had dreamed about during his brief college studies, before family circumstances forced him to drop out. Why me? Marcus asked. There must be hundreds of people with better qualifications who would want this job. Victoria smiled. Do you remember what you said to me in the hospital? When I offered to pay you for saving my life. I said I did not want your money. Exactly. You turned down a reward from a billionaire because you helped me as one human being helping another, not because you expected something in return. That tells me more about your character than any resume or interview could. She leaned back in her chair, her expression becoming more serious. But I need to be completely honest with you about what this job would involve. You would be working directly with me on major investment decisions. You would attend meetings with community leaders, city officials, and other business executives. Some of them will question your qualifications, your background, your right to be in those rooms. Victoria paused, choosing her words carefully. You would also face skepticism from some people in your own community. They might think you have forgotten where you came from, or that you are just helping a rich corporation exploit their neighborhoods. This job would change your life in ways that go far beyond the salary. Marcus thought about his current life. Working nights to avoid interaction with executives, living paycheck to paycheck despite his hard work, watching his family struggle with expenses he could not help them meet. The opportunity Victoria was offering represented everything he had hoped for when he started college, everything that had seemed impossible when he was forced to drop out. But she was right about the challenges. Moving from janitor to executive would place him in a world where he did not understand the rules, where people would judge him based on his background rather than his abilities. He would be representing Blackstone Financial in communities where corporations were viewed with suspicion, trying to convince people that a billionaire's company genuinely wanted to help rather than simply profit from their neighborhoods. Can I think about it? Marcus asked. Of course. This is a major decision that will affect your entire family. Take whatever time you need. Victoria handed him a business card with her direct phone number. Call me when you have decided, or if you have questions about any aspect of the position. Marcus stood to leave, still processing the enormity of what had just happened. As he reached the door, Victoria called his name. Marcus, I want you to know that this offer has nothing to do with gratitude or obligation. I am not offering you this job because you saved my life. I am offering it because I believe you are the right person for it, and because Blackstone Financial needs what you can bring to this work. The next week passed in a blur of conversations with his family about the job offer. His mother was excited about the health insurance and the possibility of Marcus finishing his education. Carlos was amazed that his brother might be able to help pay for college without working multiple jobs. But both of them worried about the pressures Marcus would face in such a different environment. Marcus spent his nights cleaning the executive floors while thinking about what it would be like to work in one of those offices during the day. He imagined himself in business suits instead of janitor uniforms, attending meetings instead of emptying trash cans, making decisions that affected entire communities instead of simply maintaining clean spaces for other people to work. On Friday night, Marcus called the number on Victoria's business card. She answered on the second ring. I would like to accept the position, he said. But I have some conditions. What conditions? I want to keep working as a janitor for 2 weeks while I learn the new job. I need to make sure I can handle the responsibilities before I give up work I know I can do well. And I want a written agreement that if the new position does not work out, I can return to my janitor job without any negative consequences. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Those are reasonable conditions. You want security while you transition to something completely different. I respect that. There is one more thing, Marcus continued. I want to be judged on my performance, not on gratitude for what happened that night in your office. If I am not good at this job, I want you to tell me honestly rather than keeping me because you feel obligated. Agreed, Victoria said immediately. When can you start? Monday morning? Marcus's first day as a community investment analyst began at 7:30 a.m. when he arrived at the Blackstone Financial Tower wearing his only business suit, purchased the weekend before at a discount store. The suit was not expensive, but it was clean and properly fitted, and Marcus hoped it would help him blend into the corporate environment he was about to enter. Victoria met him in the lobby and escorted him to the 35th floor, where the Community Development Division occupied an entire section of offices. The space was modern and professional, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city skyline. Marcus had cleaned these floors many times but had never paid attention to what kind of work happened here during business hours. "Your office," Victoria said, opening the door to a medium-sized room with a desk, computer, and small conference table. The nameplate on the door read, Marcus Rivera, Community Investment Analyst. Seeing his name on that door, in that context, felt surreal. "This is really happening," Marcus said quietly. "Yes, it is. And you are going to do well." Victoria handed him a thick folder. "These are the current projects our division is evaluating. I want you to spend the morning reviewing them. Then, we will discuss your initial impressions this afternoon." The folder contained proposals for a dozen different community development projects, a small business loan program for immigrant entrepreneurs, an affordable housing complex in Marcus's own neighborhood, a job training center for young adults, and several others. Each proposal included financial projections, demographic studies, and detailed implementation plans. As Marcus read through the documents, he began to see patterns that troubled him. The affordable housing project, for example, was designed to provide workforce housing for families earning 80% of the area median income. But Marcus knew from personal experience that families earning 80% of the median income in his city still could not afford the proposed rents without spending more than half their income on housing. The small business loan program was structured with interest rates and repayment terms that would be challenging for any new business, particularly those in communities where customers had limited disposable income. The job training center looked impressive on paper, but the proposed location was not accessible by public transportation from the neighborhoods where participants would most likely live. When Victoria returned that afternoon, Marcus had filled several pages with notes and questions. "What did you think?" she asked, settling into one of the chairs across from his desk. Marcus chose his words carefully. "The projects all address real needs, and the financial projections look sound. But I am not sure they will actually help the communities they are supposed to serve." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "Take the affordable housing project. The rents they are proposing would still require families to spend 40 to 50% of their income on housing. That is not affordable. That is just slightly less unaffordable than market-rate apartments." Marcus flipped through his notes. "And the small business loans have interest rates that would be difficult for any new business to manage, especially in neighborhoods where economic conditions are already challenging." Victoria listened without interrupting as Marcus went through each project, explaining how the proposals looked good from a financial perspective, but failed to address the real-world constraints faced by the communities they were meant to help. "You sound like you do not think we should invest in any of these projects," Victoria said when he finished. "I think we should invest in these communities," Marcus replied, "but we need to structure the investments differently. Lower interest rates that businesses can actually afford. Housing that truly costs less than 30% of median family income. Job training programs located where people can actually get to them." Victoria smiled. "And how would we maintain acceptable returns on investments with those modifications?" This was the test, Marcus realized. Victoria wanted to see if he understood both sides of the equation, community benefit and corporate profitability. "Longer-term horizons," Marcus said after thinking for a moment. "Most of these projects are designed to generate returns within 3 to 5 years. But real community development takes longer than that. If we plan for 10 or 15-year returns, we can afford lower interest rates and truly affordable rents because we build equity in appreciating neighborhoods rather than extracting maximum short-term profits." Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying Marcus's face. "That is exactly what I hoped you would say. Our current investment committee thinks entirely in terms of quarterly profits and annual returns. But sustainable community development requires patience and longer-term thinking." She pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. These are the projects I really want to pursue. They were all rejected by the investment committee as insufficiently profitable. I want you to review them and tell me which ones you think could work with proper structuring and realistic timelines. Over the following weeks, Marcus immersed himself in learning about community development finance. Victoria arranged for him to attend seminars and workshops, paired him with experienced analysts who could teach him technical skills, and gradually increased his responsibilities. He discovered that he had an intuitive understanding of how financial decisions affected real people, combined with a growing ability to structure deals that balanced profitability with community benefit. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying. Marcus found himself evaluating a proposed community health clinic, analyzing the feasibility of a cooperative grocery store in a food desert, and reviewing plans for a mixed-income housing development that would include both affordable and market-rate units. Each project required him to consider not just financial returns, but also social impact, community acceptance, and long-term sustainability. His colleagues in the division were initially skeptical of his background, but gradually came to respect his insights. During project meetings, Marcus often asked questions that revealed problems others had missed or suggested modifications that improved both profitability and community benefit. His perspective as someone who had lived in the communities they were trying to help proved invaluable in identifying realistic solutions. After 6 weeks on the job, Victoria called Marcus into her office for a formal review of his performance. "How do you feel about the work?" she asked. "I love it," Marcus replied without hesitation. "I wake up every morning excited about what we are trying to accomplish. Even when projects are complicated or frustrating, I know that what we are doing matters." Victoria nodded. "Your supervisor tells me you are exceeding expectations. Your analysis of the housing cooperative project identified cost savings that made the entire development financially viable. And your recommendations for the small business loan program have attracted interest from 3 other community banks who want to participate." She handed Marcus a document that he immediately recognized as a performance evaluation. The ratings were all excellent or outstanding, with detailed comments praising his analytical skills, community knowledge, and collaborative approach to problem solving. "There is something else we need to discuss," Victoria said, her tone becoming more serious. "I have been invited to speak at the National Community Development Conference next month. It is the largest gathering of people working in this field, including representatives from government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and private investors." Marcus wondered why she was telling him this. "I want you to come with me," Victoria continued. "Not as my assistant, but as a co-presenter. We will be discussing Blackstone Financial's approach to community development, particularly how we are trying to balance profit with genuine community benefit. Your perspective on these issues is exactly what the audience needs to hear." The idea of speaking at a national conference terrified Marcus. He had never given a presentation to more than a dozen people, let alone hundreds of professionals working in community development. "I'm not sure I am qualified for something like that," Marcus said honestly. "You are more qualified than you realize," Victoria replied. "You understand these issues from the inside." Most of the conference attendees are well-meaning professionals who studied community development in graduate school, but have never actually lived in the communities they are trying to help. Your voice, your experience, your perspective is exactly what they need to hear. Victoria pulled out a conference program and showed Marcus the session they would be presenting. Community investment from the community perspective, balancing profit and purpose in development finance. The description indicated that the session would focus on practical strategies for ensuring that private investment actually benefited the communities it was supposed to help. "What would I talk about?" Marcus asked. "Your experience. What it feels like to live paycheck to paycheck while working full-time. What affordable housing actually means to families who are struggling. How transportation, child care, and other factors affect whether job training programs actually help people find better employment." Victoria leaned forward slightly. "The difference between community development that looks good on paper and community development that actually works." Marcus spent the next week preparing for the conference presentation. Victoria arranged for him to work with a public speaking coach who helped him organize his thoughts and practice delivering them clearly and confidently. He wrote and rewrote his portion of the presentation, focusing on specific examples of how well-intentioned development projects could fail to help the people they were designed to serve. The conference was held in Chicago at a large hotel downtown. Marcus had never been to Chicago before, had never stayed in a hotel nicer than a roadside motel, had never been in a room with hundreds of professional people who shared his interest in community development. The experience was overwhelming but also exciting. Their presentation was scheduled for the second day of the conference. Marcus spent the first day attending other sessions, listening to presentations about innovative financing strategies, successful housing developments, and creative approaches to small business support. He was struck by how many of the presenters seemed to focus more on the cleverness of their financial structures than on the actual outcomes for community residents. The morning of their presentation, Marcus felt nervous but ready. He had practiced his talk dozens of times and knew exactly what points he wanted to make. Victoria introduced him to the audience of about 300 people as a community development analyst who brings a unique perspective to our work because of his own background in the communities we serve. Marcus began his presentation by describing his former life as a night janitor, his family's struggles with medical expenses and educational costs, and his personal experience with the challenges faced by working families. He talked about the difference between housing that was labeled as affordable and housing that families could actually afford, between job training programs that looked good in proposals and programs that actually helped people find sustainable employment. The audience was completely silent as Marcus spoke, clearly engaged with his message. When he finished, the first question came from a young woman who worked for a nonprofit housing organization. How do we balance the need for private investment returns with the community's need for truly affordable housing? She asked. Marcus had been hoping for this question. Longer time horizons, he replied. Most private investors want returns within 3 to 5 years. But community development takes 10 to 15 years to really succeed. If investors are willing to be patient, they can earn reasonable returns while providing genuine benefit to communities. He went on to describe several of the projects Blackstone Financial was developing, explaining how they had restructured traditional investment approaches to achieve both profitability and community benefit over longer time periods. The questions continued for nearly an hour, with audience members asking about specific strategies for community engagement, methods for measuring social impact, and ways to ensure that development projects actually served local residents rather than displacing them. Marcus found himself answering confidently, drawing on both his personal experience and the technical knowledge he had gained over the past few months. After the presentation, dozens of people approached Marcus and Victoria to continue the discussion. Community development professionals from across the country wanted to learn more about Blackstone Financial's approach and to share their own experiences with similar challenges. Several attendees asked for Marcus's business card and invited him to visit their projects. On the flight back home, Victoria seemed pleased with how the presentation had been received. "You did exceptionally well," she said. "Half the people at that conference have advanced degrees in urban planning or public policy, but you were the one who could speak most clearly about what community development actually means to the people it is supposed to help." Marcus looked out the airplane window at the city lights below. 3 months ago, he had been cleaning offices and emptying trash cans, invisible to the people who made important decisions about investments and community development. Now he was being recognized as an expert in the field, invited to speak at conferences, and consulted on major investment decisions. But the most satisfying part was knowing that his work was making a real difference. The projects he had helped structure were moving forward, creating affordable housing, supporting small businesses, and providing job training in communities that desperately needed these resources. His unique perspective had helped ensure that these investments would actually benefit the people they were designed to serve. 6 months into his new career, Marcus received an unexpected phone call that would test everything he had learned about community development and corporate responsibility. The caller identified himself as David Chun, a reporter for the Financial Tribune, one of the most respected business newspapers in the country. "Mr. Rivera, I am investigating Blackstone Financial's community development investments," Chun said. "I have information suggesting that these projects are not as beneficial to local communities as the company claims. Would you be willing to comment on these allegations?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten. What kind of allegations? that Blackstone Financial is using community development as a public relations strategy while actually displacing long-term residents and gentrifying neighborhoods. That the affordable housing projects are affordable only to people who already have good jobs, not to the families who currently live in these areas. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, with Marcus declining to comment until he could review whatever evidence the reporter had gathered. But, after hanging up, he realized that everything he had worked for over the past 6 months could be threatened by this investigation. If the Financial Tribune published a negative story about Blackstone Financial's community development work, it could damage not only the company, but also the specific projects that Marcus had helped design. Marcus immediately went to Victoria's office and told her about the phone call. She listened without interrupting, her expression becoming more serious as he described the reporter's questions. "What do you think prompted this investigation?" Victoria asked when Marcus finished. "I'm not sure. But we should probably review all our projects to make sure we can respond to any criticism with facts and evidence." Marcus paused, considering something that had been bothering him. "There is one project that concerns me. The Riverside housing development." Victoria knew the project well. Riverside was a mixed-income housing complex being built in Marcus's former neighborhood, combining affordable units with market-rate apartments and retail space. The project was supposed to create new housing options while preserving the community's character, but Marcus had noticed some troubling developments during his recent visits to the construction site. "What concerns you about Riverside?" Victoria asked. "The affordable units are not actually affordable to the families who currently live in that neighborhood," Marcus said carefully. "The rents are set at 80% of area median income, but most families in that area earn only 60% of median income. And the market rate units are attracting residents from outside the neighborhood, people with higher incomes who are changing the character of local businesses and services." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Are you saying we are contributing to gentrification?" "I am saying we might be. The families who have lived in that neighborhood for years are not benefiting from the new housing. They are being priced out by it. And the new retail space is attracting businesses that serve the higher-income residents rather than the existing community." This was exactly the kind of issue that could fuel a negative news story. Marcus realized that his success in community development would be meaningless if the projects he supported actually harmed the communities they were supposed to help. "What do you recommend?" Victoria asked. Marcus had been thinking about this problem for weeks. "We need to restructure the affordable units to serve families earning 50 to 60% of median income, not 80%. And we need to include requirements for local hiring and community-serving businesses in the retail space. That will reduce our returns on the project significantly." "Yes, it will. But it will also ensure that the project actually benefits the existing community rather than displacing it." Victoria studied Marcus's face, clearly weighing the financial implications against the social impact of his recommendation. This was the fundamental tension that existed in all community development work, the need to generate reasonable returns for investors while providing genuine benefit to low-income communities. "Make those changes," Victoria said finally. "Restructure the affordable units and revise the retail requirements. I would rather have lower returns on a project that actually works than higher returns on a project that contributes to the problems we are trying to solve." Over the next week, Marcus worked with the development team to modify the Riverside project. The changes were significant, reducing rents on affordable units, increasing the percentage of units designated as affordable, and requiring retail tenants to demonstrate that their businesses would serve the existing community. The modifications reduced projected returns from 12% to 8%, still profitable, but less attractive to investors focused solely on financial performance. The Financial Tribune article was published 3 weeks later. The headline read, "Community Development or Corporate PR? Questions about private investment in low-income neighborhoods." The story raised legitimate questions about whether private companies could genuinely balance profit motives with community benefit, using several development projects by different companies as examples. Blackstone Financial was mentioned in the article, but not negatively. The reporter had found several community leaders who praised the company's willingness to modify projects based on community feedback. Marcus was quoted in the article, describing the challenges of ensuring that development projects actually served existing residents rather than displacing them. The key is recognizing that real community development takes time and requires ongoing engagement with local residents. Marcus was quoted as saying, "Quick profits and community benefit rarely go together. Companies that are serious about helping communities need to be willing to accept lower returns over longer time periods." The article generated significant discussion in the community development field. Several other companies contacted Blackstone Financial asking for advice on how to structure investments that balance profitability with genuine community benefit. Marcus found himself invited to speak at additional conferences and consulted by nonprofit organizations working on similar projects. But the most meaningful response came from Marcus's own neighborhood. The Riverside housing development had opened its first phase of affordable units, and demand was overwhelming. Families that had been struggling to find decent housing they could afford now had access to modern apartments with rents they could actually manage. The retail space included a community health clinic, a grocery store that accepted food stamps, and a job training center that was already placing local residents in construction and healthcare positions. Marcus walked through the completed development one evening after work, observing how the new residents were integrating with the existing community. Children were playing in the new playground, mixing kids from the affordable units with children from the market-rate apartments. The community center was hosting a meeting about improvements to the local elementary school, attended by both long-term residents and newcomers. This was what community development was supposed to look like: new resources and opportunities that strengthened existing communities rather than replacing them. The project was not perfect, and there were still challenges to address, but it represented a genuine attempt to balance private investment with community benefit. Victoria found Marcus in the community center that evening, reviewing attendance records for the job training programs. "How is it going?" she asked. "Better than I expected," Marcus replied. "The job training program has a 78% completion rate, and 85% of graduates have found employment within 3 months. The health clinic is serving 200 families per month, and we have a waiting list of 150 families for the next phase of affordable units." Victoria smiled. "And our returns?" "On track for 8% annually, exactly what we projected after the modifications. Lower than traditional real estate investment, but acceptable for patient capital focused on long-term value creation." They walked through the development together, observing the mix of old and new residents, the blend of affordable and market-rate housing, the combination of community-serving and market-oriented businesses. It was not a perfect solution to the challenges of community development, but it was a working example of how private investment could genuinely benefit low-income communities when structured thoughtfully. "Marcus," Victoria said as they reached her car, "I have been thinking about expanding the community development division. The success of projects like Riverside has attracted interest from institutional investors who want to participate in socially responsible investment strategies." Marcus knew that expanding the division would mean more projects, more opportunities to help communities, and more complex challenges to navigate. "What would expansion involve?" he asked. "A larger staff, bigger projects, partnerships with other companies and nonprofit organizations. And I would want you to lead the expansion as Director of Community Investment Strategy." The title surprised Marcus. Director was a senior executive position, several levels above his current role as analyst. It would involve managing other professionals, representing Blackstone Financial in high-level meetings, and making strategic decisions about millions of dollars in community investments. "I have been in this job for 6 months, Marcus said. "Most people in director positions have years of experience in finance and community development. Most people in director positions do not understand these communities the way you do," Victoria replied. "And most of them do not have your ability to see how financial decisions affect real people. The expansion will require someone who can maintain our commitment to genuine community benefit while managing larger and more complex projects." Marcus thought about what the promotion would mean for his family. The salary increase would ensure that his mother received the best possible medical care and that Carlos could finish college without working multiple jobs. It would also mean that Marcus could afford to buy a house in a better neighborhood, giving his family the stability and security they had never had. But More importantly, the promotion would give him the opportunity to influence how community development was practiced on a much larger scale. As director, he could help establish standards and practices that other companies might follow, potentially improving the lives of thousands of families and communities across the country. I accept, Marcus said, but I want to maintain the same standards we have established here. Community benefit is not negotiable, even when it means lower returns for investors. I would not expect anything else, Victoria replied. That commitment to community benefit is what makes our approach valuable. Investors are beginning to understand that sustainable returns require sustainable communities. 2 years after Marcus became Director of Community Investment Strategy, Blackstone Financial faced its biggest challenge yet. A national recession was beginning to affect financial markets, and many companies were cutting back on investments that were not essential to their core business operations. Some board members questioned whether community development projects, with their longer time horizons and lower returns, were appropriate during economic uncertainty. Marcus sat in the boardroom of Blackstone Financial, surrounded by executives who controlled billions of dollars in assets. The mahogany table was larger than the apartment he had grown up in, and the view from the 49th floor offered a panoramic view of the city where he had once struggled to pay rent on a tiny apartment. The contrast was not lost on him as he prepared to defend the Community Development Division against proposals to significantly reduce its funding. The community development portfolio has generated an average return of 8.2% annually, Marcus began, clicking to his first presentation slide. That is below our traditional real estate investments, but it is competitive with other long-term investment strategies, and it comes with significantly lower risk during economic downturns. Board member Robert Harrison, a man in his 60s who had built his fortune in traditional commercial real estate, shook his head skeptically. 8% returns are acceptable during good economic times, but we are potentially facing a recession. We need to focus on investments that can generate quick returns or at least preserve capital during market volatility. Marcus had anticipated this argument. Actually, our community development investments are more resilient during recessions than traditional commercial real estate. Affordable housing maintains occupancy rates even when luxury developments suffer. Community health clinics and job training centers become more important during economic downturns, not less important. He clicked to the next slide, showing occupancy and performance data from the 2008 recession. During the last major economic downturn, our community development projects maintained 95% occupancy rates, while commercial real estate occupancy dropped to 78%. The reason is simple. People need affordable housing, healthcare, and job training more during difficult times, not less. Victoria, who had been quiet during the early part of the discussion, leaned forward slightly. Marcus raises an important point about the counter-cyclical nature of these investments. But I want to hear more about the social impact measurement. How do we quantify the non-financial benefits of this work? Marcus clicked to a comprehensive slide showing social impact metrics from their community development projects. Over the past 2 years, our investments have created 2,400 permanent jobs, provided affordable housing for 1,800 families, and supported healthcare services for more than 5,000 people. The job training programs have achieved an 82% employment placement rate, and 67% of program graduates received wage increases of 25% or more. Board member Susan Chun, an economist who specialized in urban development, asked, "What about displacement and gentrification? Are we contributing to these problems in any of our project areas?" This was the question Marcus had been hoping for. We have developed comprehensive anti-displacement protocols for all our projects. We require that 30% of new housing units serve families earning 50% or less of area median income. We include local hiring requirements for construction and permanent jobs. And we mandate community benefit agreements that ensure new retail and commercial spaces serve existing residents. Marcus clicked to before and after photos of their largest development project, showing how the neighborhood had improved while maintaining its character and affordability for existing residents. The Riverside development, which several of you have visited, now serves 400 families in affordable housing, provides health care for 800 families monthly, and has created 150 permanent jobs for local residents. Property values in the surrounding area have increased by 12%, benefiting existing homeowners without displacing renters because of our affordability requirements. Harrison remained skeptical. That sounds impressive, but what happens to these projects if the economy gets worse? Will families be able to maintain their rent payments? Will small businesses in the retail spaces survive a recession? Marcus had prepared for this question as well. We have built recession resilience into our project structure. Affordable housing rents are set below 30% of tenant incomes, providing a buffer for economic hardship. Our small business loan programs include temporary payment deferrals for economic emergencies. And our job training programs are focused on recession-resistant sectors like healthcare and essential services. Victoria added, we also have partnerships with local social service organizations that provide additional support during economic downturns. These projects are designed to help communities weather economic storms, not just generate returns during good times. The discussion continued for another hour, with board members asking detailed questions about financial projections, risk management, and competitive positioning. Marcus answered each question with data and analysis, but also with stories about specific families and businesses that had been helped by their investments. When the formal presentation ended, Victoria called for a vote on the Community Development Division's budget for the following year. Marcus had requested $200 million for new investments, maintaining the division's current level of activity. Some board members had proposed cutting the budget to $50 million, essentially ending most new community development work. The vote was closer than Marcus had hoped. 7 board members supported maintaining the full budget, 5 supported the reduced budget, and 1 abstained. Victoria, as CEO, cast the deciding vote in favor of maintaining full funding. After the meeting, Marcus felt both relieved and troubled. The Community Development Division would continue its work, but the narrow vote showed how vulnerable these investments were to changing economic conditions and shifting corporate priorities. Victoria found Marcus in his office later that afternoon, reviewing financial projections for the next quarter. You did well in there, she said. Your presentation was thorough and persuasive. But barely persuasive enough, Marcus replied. If the economy gets worse, or if a few board members change their minds, we could lose support for this work entirely. Victoria sat down across from Marcus's desk. That is why I want to discuss something with you. I have been thinking about ways to make community development investment more sustainable, less dependent on corporate goodwill or favorable economic conditions. She handed Marcus a thick document marked Confidential Business Plan. I am considering spinning off the Community Development Division into a separate company, a social impact investment fund that would raise capital from institutional investors who specifically want to combine reasonable returns with measurable social benefits. Marcus read through the business plan quickly. The proposed fund would be independent of Blackstone Financial, but would benefit from the expertise and track record the division had built. It would raise money from pension funds, university endowments, and other institutional investors who were increasingly interested in environmental, social, and governance (ESG) investing. This would make community development investment much more sustainable, Marcus said, understanding the implications immediately. We would not be competing with higher return investments for corporate capital, and we would be serving investors who specifically want social impact along with financial returns. Exactly. And I want you to consider becoming the managing director of the new fund. You would have complete operational control over investment decisions, subject to board oversight and investor relations. The position Victoria was describing would make Marcus the chief executive of an investment fund with potentially hundreds of millions of dollars under management. It would represent the ultimate transformation from janitor to executive, from someone who cleaned offices to someone who controlled major investment decisions affecting thousands of families. What would happen to the work we are already doing? Marcus asked. The existing projects would transfer to the new fund. We would continue managing them and build on our track record to attract additional investors. The fund could potentially grow to manage over $1 billion within 5 years, dramatically expanding our ability to support community development nationwide. Marcus thought about what this opportunity would mean. Running an independent fund would give him the freedom to pursue community development investment without the constraints of traditional corporate profit expectations. It would allow him to hire staff who shared his commitment to genuine community benefit. And it would create a model that other organizations could replicate, potentially transforming how community development was financed across the country. But it would also mean leaving Blackstone Financial, the company that had given him his start in this career. It would mean taking responsibility for raising capital from sophisticated investors, managing complex financial structures, and building an organization from scratch. "I need to think about this," Marcus said finally. "Of course, this is a major decision that would affect not just your career, but also the future of community development investment. Take whatever time you need." That evening, Marcus visited the Riverside development, walking through the neighborhood where he had once lived as a struggling janitor. The transformation was remarkable. New affordable housing mixed with renovated existing buildings, small businesses thriving in modern retail spaces, children playing safely in well-maintained parks. The community center was hosting a meeting about college preparation programs, attended by dozens of high school students and their parents. Marcus stopped by the community health clinic, where he found Dr. Rodriguez, the physician who directed the facility. Dr. Rodriguez had grown up in this neighborhood and returned after medical school specifically to serve the community where he was raised. "How are things going?" Marcus asked. "Better than I ever expected," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "We are seeing 300 patients per month now, and we just received approval to add dental services. The job training program has referred 15 people for healthcare career preparation, and 3 of them will start nursing school next semester." They walked through the clinic together, observing the mix of services provided: primary care for children and adults, mental health counseling, nutrition education, and prenatal care. The clinic was busy but not overcrowded, serving families who had previously relied on emergency rooms for basic medical needs. "The funding model you developed has made all the difference," Dr. Rodriguez continued. "We can provide comprehensive care because we are not constantly worried about short-term profitability. The 5-year funding commitment allows us to hire good staff and build real relationships with our patients." As Marcus walked home through his old neighborhood, he realized that his decision about Victoria's offer was not just about his own career. The Community Development Division had proven that private investment could genuinely benefit low-income communities when structured thoughtfully and managed with long-term perspective. Creating an independent fund could scale this approach nationally, potentially helping hundreds of communities across the country. The next morning, Marcus called Victoria and accepted her offer to become managing director of the new Social Impact Investment Fund. "I have one condition," he said. "The fund's mission statement must include a commitment to hiring and promoting people from the communities we serve. Our staff should include people who understand these issues from personal experience, not just professional training." "Agreed," Victoria said immediately. "When do you want to begin the transition?" Over the following months, Marcus worked to establish the new fund, which was named Community Capital Partners. He hired a diverse staff that included community organizers, social workers, urban planners, and financial analysts. Half of the staff had grown up in low-income communities, bringing personal experience to complement their professional expertise. The fund's first capital raise exceeded expectations, attracting $400 million from institutional investors interested in combining social impact with reasonable financial returns. The investor base included university endowments, pension funds, and family foundations that specifically sought investments aligned with their social missions. At the fund's inaugural investor meeting, Marcus stood before an audience of some of the most sophisticated institutional investors in the country. He was no longer nervous about speaking to powerful people. His track record and expertise had earned him their respect. Community Capital Partners represents a new approach to development finance, Marcus began. "We believe that patient capital, deployed with deep community knowledge and genuine commitment to resident benefit, can generate both reasonable returns and measurable social impact." He described the fund's investment philosophy: longer time horizons that allowed for genuine affordability, community engagement requirements that ensured local benefit, and performance metrics that measured social outcomes alongside financial returns. "Our track record shows that this approach works," Marcus continued. Community development investments structured with these principles have generated 8.3% average annual returns while creating thousands of jobs, providing affordable housing for thousands of families, and supporting essential services in underserved communities. The questions from investors were sophisticated and challenging, focusing on risk management, scalability, and competitive positioning. Marcus answered each question with data and analysis, but also with stories about specific communities and families that had benefited from their investments. After the meeting, several investors approached Marcus privately to discuss additional capital commitments and partnership opportunities. The fund was positioned to grow significantly over the next few years, potentially managing over $1 billion within 5 years. As Marcus drove home that evening, he passed the Blackstone Financial Tower where his transformation had begun. The building looked different from his perspective as managing director of Community Capital Partners. He was no longer the invisible janitor who cleaned these offices at night, but he was also no longer the junior executive who needed Victoria's protection and guidance. Marcus had become a leader in the community development field, someone whose voice mattered in national discussions about how to address inequality and create opportunities in low-income communities. The poor janitor who had saved a billionaire's life had evolved into a successful executive who was using his position to help thousands of families improve their economic circumstances. But, perhaps most importantly, Marcus had proven that people from working-class backgrounds could succeed in professional environments without losing their understanding of and commitment to the communities they came from. His success had opened doors for other people who brought diverse perspectives to the typically elite world of investment management. 5 years after finding Victoria collapsed in her office, Marcus Rivera had become exactly the kind of person he had once cleaned up after, a successful executive with significant influence over major financial decisions. But, unlike many people in his position, Marcus had never forgotten what it felt like to struggle economically, to worry about paying bills despite working full-time, to feel invisible in a world controlled by people who never noticed him. That memory, and his commitment to using his success to help others, would guide Community Capital Partners as it worked to prove that private investment could genuinely serve the public good. The poor janitor's life-saving kiss had indeed changed everything, not just for Marcus and Victoria, but for the thousands of families who would benefit from a new approach to community development that prioritized people alongside profits. As they drove back toward downtown, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that night when he found Victoria collapsed in her office. The poor janitor who had saved a billionaire's life was now being promoted to a director position at one of the largest financial companies in the country, with responsibility for investments that would affect thousands of families in low-income communities. The transformation had required more than just Victoria's initial job offer. Marcus had needed to prove himself through hard work, careful analysis, and genuine commitment to the mission of community development. He had needed to learn technical skills while maintaining his understanding of how financial decisions affected real people. And he had needed to navigate the complex challenge of balancing profit with social impact in a corporate environment that was still learning how to value both. But, perhaps most importantly, Marcus had learned that his background as a janitor, as someone who had struggled financially, as a member of the communities that community development was supposed to help, was not something to overcome or hide. It was his greatest professional asset, the source of insights and perspectives that could not be gained through education or training alone. The night shift janitors were beginning their work as Marcus and Victoria returned to the Blackstone Financial Tower. Marcus saw them in the lobby, dressed in the same uniform he had worn for 6 years, carrying the same supplies he had used to clean the executive floors. He nodded respectfully to them, knowing that their work was essential and dignified, knowing that some of them might have dreams and abilities that went far beyond their current job titles. 6 months ago, Marcus had been one of them, invisible to the executives and professionals who worked in the building during normal business hours. Tomorrow, he would return as a director, responsible for managing investments that could change entire communities. The journey from janitor to executive had been rapid and unexpected, but it had been earned through competence, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to using his opportunities to help others. Everything had changed, but Marcus was still the same person who had chosen to save Victoria's life rather than simply call for emergency services. He was still someone who understood that real success meant lifting others up, that genuine leadership meant serving communities rather than just generating profits. The poor janitor had become a successful executive, but he had never forgotten where he came from or why his work mattered. As the plane descended toward home, Marcus thought about how much his life had changed since that night when he found Victoria collapsed in her office. Saving her life had opened opportunities he could never have imagined, but success in his new career had required him to prove himself through hard work, careful analysis, and genuine commitment to the mission of community development. The poor janitor who had kissed death away from a billionaire was becoming a respected professional in his own right, someone whose voice mattered in discussions about how to improve communities and create opportunities for working families. Everything had changed, but Marcus was still the same person who valued helping others above personal gain, who understood the struggles of ordinary families, and who believed that with the right approach, private investment could genuinely benefit the communities that needed it most. Perfect. Meet me in my office at 8 a.m. We will begin with an overview of the Community Development Division and the projects we are currently evaluating. Welcome to Blackstone Financial, Marcus. I think you are going to be very good at this. After hanging up, Marcus sat in his small apartment kitchen, staring at the phone and trying to comprehend what had just happened. In the space of 1 month, he had gone from being invisible night janitor to being personally recruited by a billionaire CEO for a position that would transform his family's financial situation. But, as he prepared for bed, Marcus realized that the real change had started the night he found Victoria collapsed in her office. His decision to help her, to think about consequences beyond his immediate situation, had revealed something about his character that even he had not fully understood. Victoria had seen potential in him that went beyond his job title or educational credentials. The next Monday would mark the beginning of a completely different life, one filled with opportunities and challenges he could barely imagine. For the first time since his father's death, Marcus fell asleep feeling hopeful about the future, knowing that his family's struggles were about to become much easier, and that he might finally have the chance to make a real difference in his community. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus thought about Victoria's words in the hospital. This changes things. She had been right, though neither of them could have predicted exactly how much would change or how quickly it would happen. A poor janitor's decision to save a billionaire's life had opened doors that had seemed permanently closed, creating possibilities that neither of them had imagined when they first met in that dark corner office at 3 in the morning. But, as Marcus rode the bus home to his neighborhood, he could not shake the feeling that Victoria Blackstone was not the type of person who forgot debts or ignored opportunities. She had built her empire by seeing potential where others saw only problems. Whether that was good or bad for him remained to be seen. The morning news carried no mention of any health problems for Blackstone Financial CEO. The stock market opened normally, and the company's shares performed as expected. Marcus watched the financial reports on the small television in his kitchen while eating breakfast, knowing that he had played a small role in maintaining that stability. Thousands of people went to work that day without knowing how close they had come to seeing their investments and jobs threatened by a medical emergency. Marcus fell asleep thinking about Victoria's blue eyes and the way she had looked at him, not as a janitor or a member of the working class, but as a person who had made a choice that mattered. For the first time in years, he wondered if his life might be about to change in ways he could not yet imagine.